Guys, I don't think any of you would agree with this, but I don't think Mike Pettine is a horrible choice. I've talked myself into Mike Pettine as an internal hire. Here's why. Tell me why I'm wrong. Seems like a courtesy interview on the surface, but I'm not going to devalue the continuity aspect because he knows the personnel that he's worked with for 1 year. So I think that's a plus for him. Even though he might have been part of the problem with Donatel, I'm still going to put a lot of that on Donatel. Mike Pettine, 7 out of 10 years as an HC or a DC, had a top 10 pass defense, which obviously that needs the most fixing on the Vikings. And the other 2 of those other 3 years, they were 12th and 14th. So always in the top half, almost the top 10. Pettine was let go from Green Bay in part because he was not LaFleur's guy. Not necessarily because he was a bad defensive coordinator. LaFleur just wanted his guy. Pettine's defenses in Green Bay were 9th and 13th. Now, there was a little bit of criticism from LaFleur about how loose his coverage was. Sound familiar? So that's maybe a red flag. But he was a huge upgrade from Dom Capers. I don't hate Mike Pettine. Why should I not like Mike Pettine? Is it because he's in-house? Is it because he was in the building? He has the stench of Ed Donatel? Luke Braun, tell me why I'm wrong.
I went over this at length on Locked On Vikings today. Yeah, a little bit. It's, I guess my question about Mike Pettine is, what problem does this solve? And if your argument is, well, it makes the coverage better, then I guess that would be the pitch. But if
that's a good argument. What?
But I don't believe it.
Okay. I was just like, it's a weird thing to dismiss, is what I was just getting at. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, well, I was getting there. I don't believe that he will fix the coverage because the problem with the coverage is the same problem that Pettine coverages had. And yeah, there is a little bit of, unless your argument is that Ed Donatel specifically was the issue inside the defensive room and everybody else in that defensive room was doing just fine, which I think is a little too charitable to everybody else in that defensive room. I kind of feel like, yeah, there is a little bit of blame for Mike Pettine. I get that he's very close to Kevin O'Connell and kind of a mentor to Kevin O'Connell, but I do not think that this solves enough problems.
Okay. I don't really view it as like problem solution in the same way. Like, to me, it's just, will it improve the defense or not? And obviously you want to balance that against the potential other candidates, but there are like some pretty interesting circumstances, right? With like looking at Mike Pettine defenses. So for example, the 2013 Buffalo Bills were like 20th in points allowed. They were 4th in DVOA. They had an all-time awful offense headed up by EJ Manuel, gave them awful field position, terrible turnover luck, right? 4th in DVOA, right? These are pretty good defenses, generally speaking. I think the 2018 Green Bay Packers defense was not great, but I think the following 2 defenses in DVOA, which is a loose approximation of EPA, were in the top half, right? Generally speaking, he has not coordinated bad defenses. I don't count the head coach years because he wasn't calling plays for Cleveland. I don't think he was that involved. So I don't really like, there's a huge negative reputation for him based off of, quote unquote, what happened in Green Bay, which I find interesting because Green Bay has just not found a defensive coordinator over like the past 7 years. Like, they just haven't been good on defense. And like, at what point are we going to assign that completely to a defensive coordinator? If you want to dismiss the early years with the New York Jets or Baltimore just because of how talented those units were, that's fine. But I think that like uncovering a lot of that Buffalo Bills defense, like Nigel Bradham and Aaron Searcy and Jairus Byrd, who did not succeed anywhere else, by the way, got a huge contract in New Orleans, did not succeed anywhere else, right? That defense was good. It was really good. Like Kyle Williams, Marcel Darius, like, it was a good defense, right? And a lot of that defense was not good before he arrived, which is why he got a head coaching job immediately afterwards. I'm not promising that he would be a good defensive coordinator. I just don't understand why there's a negative reputation attached to him as a DC. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
And I think too, knowing what happened to his predecessor, it's not as if Pettine is going to say, all right, run it back. run it back, guys. Same thing we learned last year. Let's do it. There's
Well,
obviously
he's been
going
super
to be
flexible in his coverages. Like you take a look at what he did with the Jets, like a very, very much. I mean, having Darrelle Revis is like a really, but like very much like blitz heavy man coverage type stuff. With the Buffalo Bills, it was a little bit different. They did do a lot of cover one, but it wasn't nearly as blitz heavy. They mixed coverages a fair amount. Green Bay was a lot of cover 3, cover 6 stuff. Like they're all different coverages. Like I don't know why he would necessarily be married to a coverage type. Now, obviously, Kevin O'Connell has a preference for what he wants the pre-snap look to look like, which is going to dictate to some level what kind of coverages you're capable of running, because that's where your players are just going to start the snap off at. But he seems like he's flexible enough to adapt the coverage to the players that he has based off of his history as a defensive coordinator. Like, I don't know. The objections that I have seen, and I have not searched for them, so I maybe haven't seen a lot of them, to Mike Pettine seem to largely be objections to like what he did in Green Bay, which is like, well, the people before him, the people after him didn't do well either. What Donatel does, which is like not historically all that related to what Mike Pettine has done. So I don't know, man.
Here's Pettine's DVOA defenses. Like you said, started out red hot with the Jets. Rex Ryan, Darrelle Revis, great defense. So if you want to kind of, I don't know, put an asterisk by that, you can. But first six,
just run man coverage. You got Antonio Cromartie and Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Do it. Yeah.
And then, as Arif mentioned, the 2013 Bills defensive coordinator, 4th DVOA in the league. Browns head coach. Now, I'm on that because he was the head coach. Not sure defensive side of the ball. I'm sure he had a little bit to do with it, right? Head coach 13th and 30th in 2015, and then with the Packers 29th. And then a big leap forward, but still middle of the pack, 15th and then 17th in 2019 and 2020. So started out red hot. The Bills year, I'm with Arif. The Bills year really sticks out to you with what he did with that player personnel. I think, I understand both sides of the coin. I'm more in I would prefer a fresh approach. Brian Flores seems to be the big buzz name. I would love it. You go get him 1 or 2 legit corners. I would love that. Desai, you guys kind of talked me into that. Arif, your breakdown on him, what he could do with just our player personnel with that background, possibly introducing more of a hybrid 4-3-3-4, maximizing whatever players and they do best. I was really intrigued with that when we discussed that last week, but I do understand your guys' point as far as like, he's not as stubborn as maybe people are making it sound. And he did show some flexibility this year. And to your point, Sam, like he's not just going to run it back, copy and paste. All right, let's try it again. All right, it's going to be different this time with, less defensive veterans on the team this time around. Right. So I get it. I would like to start fresh, start clean, new approach, especially the options out there. I'm intrigued again by Flores and Desai. But I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world, like a lot of people are making it sound, if they did run it back. Because, as you both mentioned, there's some legitimate reasons why they could do that.
Yeah.
How do we know that Brian Flores would be good? Like, I genuinely don't. I don't
think we know that any of these guys would be good. That's why I'm trying to approach it as like, okay, what is the strategy that it represents? And do I like that strategy? But I don't know.
It's just like there's differing levels of excitement about a bunch of these names, and it just feels like there's very little information that would tell us very much about how these people would perform.
Well, if we're going off the DVOA with Pettine, then we can go off the DVOA with Flores. It was 11th and 10th in Miami.
He's like the head coach,
2021.
right? Like he wasn't calling plays, right?
Would you agree that Pettine has the most information?
Yeah, Pettine has the most information, and it is somewhat conflicting. I would argue generally positive, but somewhat conflicting. But it's just like people are really excited about Desai. And, Luke, I did sell you a little bit on that just because of kind of the history of the way that those fronts can work. And then people are excited about Brian Flores. And it's just like, well, I don't like he was a linebackers coach in New England, right? Which, like, I'm excited about Gerard Mayo, linebackers coach, but I know that Gerard Mayo was the defensive coordinator there. Like, that's kind of a difference, even though he's a linebackers coach. Like, was Brian Flores also the defensive coordinator? I don't think he was the New England Patriots, right? And I don't think he called plays for the Miami Dolphins. So, like, it's not that I think he'd be bad. Just like with Ryan Nielsen, I have no idea what this would represent. It's more, I find the enthusiasm for a lot of these guys really interesting because there's just not much. Like, to me, it's more I'm open to kind of whatever's going to happen here. I could just as easily see it being good as bad. And a lot of people are like, yeah, Brian Flores, he's a really great defensive mind. And it's like, is he? How do you know?
He took over play calling in week 10, it says, versus the Ravens. That was 2020, I guess.
What, did they
just for that
get, like, crazy
second half of the
players
season.
somewhere or
He took
something?
over from there on out. But I guess that,
And is that when they turned it all around?
Was that the 7-1?
I'd have to pull up their week by week, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I understand your argument, Arif.
You said week 10?
Yeah, week 10 versus the Ravens.
Yeah.
And then from there on out, the rest of the season, though, Flores took over.
I definitely understand that. And like, these guys represent huge unknowns, which is why any take I'm going to have on them is going to be like very softly held. But I'm definitely sympathetic to Vikings fans who don't want to hire an in-house candidate like 10 days after the defense single-handedly destroyed a 13-4 season.
Okay, hold up. The
And
first
most
9
fans aren't
games.
gonna take-
I just filtered the Miami weeks. So from weeks 11 to 17, it was 21st in defensive DVOA.
In 2021?
That was 2020.
So the first 9 games, they ranked 32nd in yards allowed per game, 31st in third down conversion, and 29th in points allowed. So basically dead last, bottom 3 in all those categories. After he took over, 16th in yards allowed, 19th in third down conversion, 15th in points allowed. So huge drastic change the second half of the season.
Good.